beginning of this word.
Thank you so much for reading, Rita. This is the last week of school, exams week. Looking at some of the high schoolers, exams week. I don't know about you, but exams for me always have a bitter aftertaste. I remember one of my exams many years ago, and it still gives me nightmares. The exam was biblical knowledge in seminary. It was an exam where we had to know literally everything about the Bible, not just all the books, but all the different stories, and how the story here is different to the story over here, the different topics, different themes, characters, and anything related to the Bible. So my friend Dieter shares with me about his experience. He was nervous. He goes into the exam room, not by a professor, but a jury of people you have never met before. And said, Mr. So-and-so, what can you tell us about the Book of Philippians? Rejoice. Okay, anything else? Rejoice in the Lord always. Rejoice. Okay, now you mentioned rejoice twice. We get it. Well, I was just quoting Philippians 4:4 in his pearls. Sweat just making up. I don't know anything about it. Anything else about joy? You must think of anything about the theme of joy in the Bible. Well, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Okay, Mr. So-and-so, I'd rather rejoice with you than mourn. Anything else you know about joy? I'm sorry, that poor student was just speechless, and he tried to wiggle his way through. Joy, what do you know about joy? Is it Philippians 4:4 coming to your mind, just what we read? Rejoice in the Lord always, and I say rejoice? Because if I look at the paper, if I just look at the news, I know my world is not always about joy. Even yesterday, the big tornadoes in Kentucky. Oh, the other news, triple homicide in Columbus on Tuesday. Rising opioid crisis in Ohio, just name. And it's not all joyous. It's not all about unicorn and chocolate and rainbows. What is it about joy that we can still light the candle of joy? Because you can say, well, it's nice for you to light it, but what is it? Well, the apostle writer Paul, who wrote all about joy in Philippians, his life wasn't all that joyous either. When he wrote it, he was in prison. Not a joy place for me. Not a fun ride. And also, we know that not only was he in prison, but also his whole situation was not necessarily being over the moon all the time. When I'm thinking about the word joy in this Advent time, I'm thinking especially about a former member, Stella. She used to live in subsidized housing, and I knew exactly where her room is without looking at the room numbers, because on her door were the three letters J-O-Y, joy. Joy, that was who she was. And her name could have easily been Joy instead of Stella. All what she was telling me was about the joy in her life, about her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and all what she was doing. She was joyous. It felt like a fountain of joy. And it was not because she gave me a little gift to take home that I felt joyous afterwards, but her joy was contagious. And I did not know, for example, that she lost a daughter as a teenager in a very tragic car accident, you wouldn't know talking to her. And that her life was not all about unicorns and rainbows either. She had a hard life full of hardships. Full of hardships. So every time I received a Christmas card, it was a joy Christmas card, because joy was her favorite word. When I called her daughter Patricia last week, I was asking her if I could tell her story. And she said, yes, joy. That was my mama. My mama was all about joy. Thank you so much for sharing her story, for saying her name, that she is not forgotten. And when I asked Patricia, what do you think, why do you think your mom was filled with joy? She said the number one reason, God was number one in Mama's life. And when we were little, I thought we were rich, because Mama used to tell us, we are rich. I thought she meant monetary rich. And then Mama said, we are rich in the Lord. There's a different kind of richness in here. And Stella's life was filled with prayer. She had a list, and she mentioned everybody and prayed with everybody by name. And I'm sure she prayed about you, lifting up by name as well. Joy. That is how I remember Stella. And thank you so much. And I'm so glad that you're here, Patricia, today when you talk about your mama. Thank you. Joy. The second reading is about John the Baptist. He is not the joy guy. He is not the one with ha, ha, ha. He actually greets us with, you brood of vipers. That's not really joy. Imagine that on a Christmas card. Brood of vipers. I'm sure that's not the Hallmark card being the bestseller for this year either. What's going on with John the Baptist? We have him every single year coming up. It's just like this dirty penny. Just keeps on coming and coming. Or this uncle you have to invite to your holiday, and you already know what's coming. You already have heard the stories many, many times, and you still try to be polite. That's about John. He has very peculiar dietary restrictions of locusts and honey. Try to find that in the deli. Just saying. That's John the Baptist, the one who is not necessarily your joy bringer. However, John knew something. John knew something which we today can still relate. Because for him, knowing probably not much about psychology, because I don't think these classes were offered when John went to college, he knew that joy comes from the inside, and that our joy is multiplied when we give. Generosity and joy are linked together like two peas in a pod. Generosity, the more we give, the more joyous we are. And I'm thinking of Stella as one example, how she gave everything for others, how many times she volunteered, how many times she just gave from the little she had. But I'm also thinking of many of you. How joyous it was last week to see the gifts for the Center of New Directions multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. Every day, more gifts were coming. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm for the newest neighbors in our community. Refugees family from a country we don't even know yet which country they come from. Thank you so much for your generosity. I'm thinking of the Christmas pageant yesterday. What many, many talents made it possible. Thank you for your generosity in sharing towards our church. Thank you for your generosity in being here for others, in helping out with the meal train as an example, or with prayers, with rides, or whatever it may be. Thank you for sharing joy. Professor Dunn, professor at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, she found the connection between joy and giving. And there are three aspects why joy, in her opinion, is not only so important, but why joy and giving are connected. It is the knowing that you make an impact in somebody else's life. Knowing that your gift, that you are important. And also knowing that how you share is your choice. That you choose to be generous. And generosity and joy are connected such a time that you can't really find the dividing line. What is what? Where does the border go between being generous and joy, or being joyful and generous? So I want to thank you for sharing your joy. And I ask you, for the challenge of the week, how do you share